My name's Joshua Chorzy, Marketing Manager here at Resourcive. Welcome to our first of 3 SASE webinars. So the goal of this series is to share with our customers and partners the emergence of SASE as an important evolution of networking and security, and to give insights into how to best think about and consider adopting a SASE framework or strategy. So since Gartner defined the term in 2019, there's been a deluge of providers entering the space, claiming to do SASE, marketing buzzwords, and creating just a lot of confusion in the market. So for us, this confusion has generated a lot of signals from our customers and partners, and kind of expressed the need for us to help break down the topic and cut through a lot of that noise. So that's what we're here to do today and over the next couple installments. And to do this, I enrolled 2 of our most senior networking and security experts, Kyle Hall and Adrian Tilston. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Kyle to get started, and just want to thank everybody for taking their time to be with us today.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Can we flip the slide here? So I guess just to start with us a little bit for anyone that doesn't know, Resourcive is the premier value creation partner for mid-market and enterprise organizations. And really what we focus on is identifying, quantifying, and executing on value creation initiatives involving technology. And then after that value is created, we look to ensure that it's protected, which is part of the reason, we acquired Adrian's company and brought him on a few months back, is to layer that cybersecurity practice on. Just a little bit about me. I've been doing this with Resourcive for about 6 years. In that time, have run a wide variety of network transformation projects, as well as other transformation projects as well, but a wide variety of network transformation projects. And have really seen this transition from what used to be MPLS to SD-WAN to a lot of point solutions, as people were starting to kind of bring the security and SD-WAN functions together. And now what has been named SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. But we'll get into some of that. Before we do, Adrian, you want to take a minute and do your intro?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Adrian Tilston, and my first introduction to cybersecurity was back in 2007 when I dual booted Backtrack 2, which is now Kali. So it's a little dated back there. I've had a varied career. Spent a little bit of time as a Green Beret, spent some time as an offensive security tool developer, and a security consultant before coming on over here. I bring up the Green Beret part because I'm familiar with the challenge of a lot of IT and security teams that are out there trying to accomplish the mission with limited resources and just trying to do the best you can. So hopefully we'll be able to give a little bit of insight today. Excellent.
Thanks, Adrian. All right. So as far as kind of the agenda for today, again, Josh mentioned there's a 3-part series here. And I guess I'll lay out the 3 parts to start. But the first, and what we're going to talk about today, is a general market overview. In the second component, in the second part, we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into the various components that encompass a complete SASE solution. And finally, in part 3, what we're going to be talking about is working through the business case, how to look at what you have today, understand the cost that you have today, understand the opportunity that SASE presents to your organization, and really drive a go, no-go type decision, as well as lay out when the timing would be right for your organization. For today, again, general intro, we'll start with why you should pay attention, like I think any good presentation should, and then get into kind of a little bit of the history and more of the framing for what's out there today, the various vendor approaches, and a general familiarity with this approach to networking. All right, Adrian. I guess why don't we jump in here, and we can even start without going too technical to start. I guess why should anybody care about this?
Yeah. So I'm going to give a really non-sexy answer to this, and it's probably counter to a lot of the vendor discussions that you have, and it's really that like enterprise network security and network design is hard. There is no real way to get around that. The more complex your organization, the more difficult that challenge. SASE itself as a concept has the potential to make it more efficient, more secure, and or less expensive. And there's really no promises attached to that. And that's why we want to get into some of those needed components. But at the end of the day, it's really going to potentially have some positive impact on your organization as you start making the decision to move to the cloud or start implementing some more advanced SD-WAN or security conversations. There's really no better way to illustrate that this is the direction that networking and security is going without, the prediction from Gartner from 2025 that 80% of enterprises are going to have adopted some kind of strategy to unify their web, cloud services, and private application using some type of SASE or SSE architecture. It was 20% last year. The current metrics aren't quite out yet, but you don't really get that type of adoption in the space that quickly if there isn't some compelling business cases attached to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one point on that, right? When I look at these things and I'm partnering with our clients and we're looking at any technology that has that rate of adoption, the other aspect to think about is like, if you don't, your competitors are. So what are the benefits that are coming from that technology? Maybe you don't need them, maybe you don't, but if it's something that's making you, more dynamic, more scalable, even potentially delivering a better employee experience to your end users, right? That becomes pretty important in a competitive labor market when you talk about retention and you talk about impacts to HR. So, a lot of angles that are being hit here. All right, how did this, Adrian? How did this come about? When I talked a little bit about how long I've been doing it and transitioning networks from MPLS to SD-WAN. I think that when we were first doing that, it was really a networking focused conversation, right? The security aspect wasn't really coming into it. That was kind of in another department somewhere else, and that's not at all the case anymore.
Right.
Can you talk just a little bit about kind of how we got here and where we're at today? Because Gartner, in true Gartner fashion, hasn't developed just one acronym here; they've done two. So
exactly.
What's up with that?
And just like you alluded to, but before, just talking about how things were designed in the past, is we had the security team and the network teams generally siloed, and they were in control of their specific domain, and those were built around having branches and the understanding that communication would go back to some type of data center. For a lot of reasons, for security processes, they were layered as best they could be based off of how we were transmitting some of that data and kind of backhauling to the data center, or even hairpinning through VPNs and all those normal bandwidth challenges that all those IT organizations are going to have. But that results in a lot of inefficiency on your network and on like CPU load, and especially when you start getting into like deep packet inspection. That starts to really shape how you size those security devices. So you also get into the fact that the security pieces were focused around securing some type of perimeter and having some type of trusted segment inside your corporate network where you would have all of your important resources. And as you move those resources into the cloud from those data centers, that consideration starts changing. And as you have workers accessing that corporate network, you're really like tripling some of your traffic, depending on how that's going in. And you're dealing with different layers of encryption and how it gets decrypted at different segments, right? So in 2019, Gartner kind of saw this design. And so they came up with this category. And really, it's just an architecture thought. And it's secure access service edge. And we'll get into the components of it, but it's really taking that network stack and the network design and just overlaying security and their capabilities as well. And of course, in true Gartner fashion, like COVID hits, right? And so they see how those organizations have had to pivot to more worker centric. And so we realized that for those organizations that don't have a corporate network, maybe they grew up as a SaaS platform and they've been using SaaS tools for the entire time. They don't actually have a corporate network to secure. So the access part of that, the SD-WAN piece, just kind of falls away. And so you end up just having to still apply those same security policies and inspection of traffic, but you're instead going to kind of overlay that into the cloud. And with no SD-WAN capability or like need for that capability, you start simplifying that. So, those familiar with implementing new SD-WAN solutions across their organization are going to get it. But I'm sure we have some IT professionals out there, but really, like, what is SSE and kind of even SASE and like the endpoint? But like, what if you had no on-prem corporate resources, right? You had no on-prem corporate resources that you had to manage access to. You didn't have to configure the infrastructure at 15 different branches and have different devices that are configured individually, and you just had to provide them internet. And all your security was enforced from cloud services. So every time someone connected, it was unified across your organization, no different firewalls or anything like that. And then it was the same for branches or corporate workers, or for remote workers. And that's kind of how you get into what is the capability offer from SASE. And I'll let you get into your famous quote here.
Yeah, marketing thought it'd be great to put a quote by me in a webinar, which I'm doing, which is that's an interesting take. So, but ultimately, what I'm speaking to here is, when I'm talking to enterprise organizations, infrastructureless organizations are one thing, kind of what you're talking about, where they actually just don't have any infrastructure anymore. But when I'm talking to enterprise organizations that still have big corporate networks, at the end of the day, most of what I see they're wanting is secure network as a service, which I think is actually a step further. That's inclusive of having the internet access in some way, shape, or form, whether broadband, wireless, DI, whatever, right? Whatever's available. But most of them that I talk to, they just want to be consuming this. They want to know that it's secure. They don't want to have to be in the business of managing carriers, managing all the configs at all the branches, and constantly in reworking firewall configs, patching, doing all that sort of thing. So I really see kind of this secure network as a service as a culmination of pulling all those things together. And when I really dig into what our clients want when we're talking to them, that's what they're saying. They're not saying SASE, they're not saying SSE. They're saying, I just want this stuff to work. I've got other things I need to be focused on.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, SASE and SSE are really just frameworks. They're just a conceptual architecture. You don't go to a vendor and say, give me SASE, give me SSE. I mean, some people are advertising that, but at the end of the day, it looks different between different vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into some of the core components of it. And, we are going to lean a little bit here, on Gartner's framework, mostly because it's the most widely adopted one. Not for any other reason other than that. But why don't we talk through some of these here, Adrian?
Yeah, no problem. And so, like we just said, you don't go to a vendor and say SASE. There is, if you look at other webinars, they're very focused on like, what is the actual concept of SASE? And we're going to cover it here just to be thorough. But at the end of the day, like you were just saying, what we're looking for is a secure network as a service. And this is one way that you can get there. Even if you just need a couple of these technologies, are you true SASE or SSE? Maybe not, but you're still trying to drive towards that business case of having a secure network. So the true Gartner definition is involving SD-WAN, secure web gateways, zero trust network access, cloud access security brokers, and next-gen firewalls, and all of that being wrapped up into some type of cloud offering. And that's kind of the point that I'm making is that, well, what about my Prisma and Palo Alto firewalls? Like, they're doing some of this on-prem. Like, is that truly SASE? At the end of the day, you as an organization probably don't care whether or not you're implementing a true SASE framework, as long as you are getting the benefits of these pieces. So for those that aren't familiar, we'll just dive into this real quick. But software-defined wide area network is, it's really allowing you to use tunnels and kind of abstracting at a different layer your networking capability. And that's a way to replace MPLS, but also prioritize some of the traffic and still get those benefits, and still allowing some of your other traffic that you may not care as much to just have a lower quality of service. The secure web gateway are focused on like application inspection and traffic, both inbound and outbound. Zero trust network access is really a framework and part of zero trust as a whole, but really focuses on having fine-grained role-based access that will go down even to the service level. So applications are only accessed by users or other services that need to, and you have fine-grained control between that. So you reduce the problems with like east to west migration and attacks. Cloud access security brokers are security policy enforcement points that are positioned between enterprise users and cloud service providers. And so they're providing access to those cloud-based services. If you've moved out of some on-prem services, moved your essential business services to like whether that's your own application or other applications that are being provided by a third-party service. And next-gen firewalls are, a lot more advanced than just blocking ports and various things. And they're using analytics and combine, depending on what vendor, other capabilities like inline application control, intrusion prevention or detection systems, threat prevention, maybe some malware inspection, all that type of stuff, or malware prevention, for transmission. But at the end of the day, when you look at these categories, again, they're concepts, and no two vendors have the same capabilities or quality of service offering across all these components.
Got it. Yeah, and I know really our next section is meant to go deep on this, right? So our next webinar in the series, we'll really be diving into each of these. But as far as kind of the benefits, I mean, here's some of the reasons we've seen, and like you're saying with the service offerings, right? No two are created alike. It's the same thing with clients, right? The advantages that they're going to get are going to depend on where they've been and where they're headed. As far as SD-WAN, I mean, I think generally very widely adopted now in some way, shape, or form, either in an as-a-service model or just self-managed, right? Customers are doing this themselves in some way, shape, or form. Like it's not debated if it's less expensive than MPLS or if it's more flexible. I think everyone has essentially agreed to that at this point. The next, though, and this is one we see a lot, and this is part of the crux of the business case at times, is consolidating point solutions, especially like in a post-M&A environment or an environment where it maybe security has been kind of in a silo and network has been in a silo. So you get all of these point solutions versus pulling them all into one. So, building out that component of the business case is a big part of what we'll talk about in the third partner series. The
advantage for small teams is huge there. That's.
Yeah, absolutely. And then scalability, right? So new branches and acquisitions. I mean, it go way back to like an MPLS network, right? I mean, you were talking 4 months lead time just to getting network connectivity there for an MPLS node. And that's a real challenge, right? For most businesses that I work with. Now with these types of solutions, you can really layer this solution on top of whatever access is there. So potentially you get out of having to do any network access change, right? You can just in an acquisition scenario or a new branch scenario, right? You're taking whatever network is available there, layering something on top of it. If you need something better that has a longer delivery time, like a DIA, you can bring that in, but you can go ahead and get those users at that site access to what they need to have access to.
The biggest restrictions we see for a lot of these is just having the capability to provide an IPsec tunnel. That's it. You can hook it up to a lot of these providers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then a better user experience. So, I mean, typically performance is better, the unified security policies, and then just managing it. You'll hear single pane of glass a lot. I want to say that's not always the case, even if vendors are saying that to you, right? Like it may be a pane of glass to a couple other panes of glass, but having it generally unified, having your configs managed in one area is a large benefit that a lot of our clients have found. And then finally, like this branch focus, right? I mean, it's not how companies are thinking of this today. Even companies that are still very much brick and mortar based, at a minimum, there's a corporate area where there are users that are traveling, and that kind of always on connectivity, and always availability is just a part of the business culture today. So I know we want to get into a little bit of the types of vendors, and Adrian, I'll let you run through this, but it's generally helpful from our perspective and what we do working with clients to try to segment the market into something that aligns with how our clients are trying to navigate the buying decision. And for us, this kind of segmentation has served us pretty well. You want to talk through it?
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll see a little bit different kind of prioritization if you're talking about pure SASE, but what we're capturing here is how you are going to implement it, right? What are you going to do if you want to get some of these benefits? And really your vendor split is going to be based off of a point-based solution that is just the capability, and you're aggregating some of those together, or some type of managed service based. They may also be aggregating some of those point solution capabilities, but generally they'll also have their own portal that will really allow you to get more of a refined, more combined view into it. Like Kyle said, there is no such thing as a single pane of glass. I hate that term when people use it, because how many single panes of glass do you, as an IT leader, have? Probably one for every product or every vendor that's come to you, and they don't all interact. But really, at the end of the day, your decision kind of comes up here. In like, some of these are going to be driven by what you want to do on your roadmap. If you only decide that you need certain capabilities based on what those components are, then you can really just purchase those point solutions. We have found that during that roadmap generation, you do start realizing, when you analyze what capabilities those components are offering, including some of the non-pictured, non-core capabilities that some of these managed service providers, like private backbones, that are going to better prioritize your cloud service. Or if you have a call center, they're going to be able to prioritize that service and certain traffic way more capably than some of the other point-based solutions. But really, this is how it kind of drives where you want to go. We'll continue on with that in the next deep dive when we go into the components and kind of that capability. But
yeah, excellent. I think the overarching kind of advice and something that I hope people take away from this is to look at this holistically. Even if you think that, hey, I really just need to take a step forward on my zero trust kind of roadmap. Let me go look at ZTNA, something like a Zscaler or something like a point solution, right? In almost every instance where we've had that type of conversation with clients, when we take a step back and look at it holistically, there are ways to approach it where you can knock down some additional, kind of items on the checklist that are out there that are things that you need to do in a network transformation, in a little bit more targeted fashion by looking at it holistically.
Yeah, and that kind of point-based solution, if you're implementing point-based solutions, you are continually in the process of implementing point-based solutions and reviewing them and managing them. A lot of the managed service bases, managed services based providers, once you are already integrated in their network and have SD-WAN, for instance, the additional capability of that other stuff is really just clicking a button in a portal and then configuring it a little bit. And now, congratulations, you have increased security on all of your traffic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about when should you consider it, right? Because in my experience, very few IT teams are sitting around with nothing to do, kind of twiddling their thumbs, right? I mean, they've got a long list of projects that are already underway, and an even longer list of projects that they, have kind of ideated on or think that they should undertake, in some way, shape, or form. What I'm generally advising the CIOs I work with to do is to find trigger points, in this type of thing. So either, updating firewalls, right? Like, this is a great opportunity to get out of procuring firewalls, shipping them out there, configuring them, doing all that yourself, and to start doing that as a service. And in general, if it's not something that's going to make your business more competitive against in the marketplace, you should consider doing it as a service. The things that, in my opinion, IT teams and IT leaders should spend the most of their time on are things that are going to make them more competitive in the marketplace, right? So something like firewalls, you can spend a lot of time doing firewall refresh, firewall management, have, a person, maybe two, maybe three on your staff that are doing network security focused type work. If the ones that are out there are into life, or they're not delivering what you're after, that could be a trigger point to evaluate a SASE framework holistically.
And a lot of people out there, a lot of companies out there are already reevaluating whether they should do hardware investment into next gen firewalls and really kind of do that in the 3 to 5 year cycle or however long you're doing it. And they're already discussing whether or not to do that in the cloud. If you're already making those changes, it becomes a lot easier and really a lot more justifiably, justifiable to move additional services as well once it's hooked up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can impact the business plan or the business case, right? You may be looking at this large expense in refreshing firewalls, and then you start looking at it and saying, okay, well, as a service, it looks like this, but we're going to get these additional, outcomes if we evaluate it, more broadly. Another one is updating or implementing SD-WAN. I would say largely updating. Very few companies do we go into anymore that aren't doing some version of SD-WAN. Maybe like an SD-WAN Lite, it may not be doing a lot of it, but a lot of what I see is they're updating it to allow for better cloud connectivity. Maybe it was a branch to branch focused type SD-WAN or an SD-WAN Lite, like a Cisco Meraki or something like that. And now they're looking and saying, hey, how do we get a little bit more control over the middle mile? Or how do we prioritize access from our users or our branches to our cloud environments? And so they're looking at kind of what their second, their second iteration on SD-WAN is going to be, because many clients have kind of made it through the first. So they're starting to look at that second one. I talked about migrating business apps to the cloud, right? I mean, as what your users need to access changes, or where it is changes, you got to look at how the network supports it.
Yeah, I mean, and people are just looking at how to secure that, right? How do you secure a remote worker who's sitting at home and logging into your crucial business, third-party app? There are fine-grained controls on some, and there's SSO capabilities and things like that. But if you have compliance requirements and you need to actually have fine-grained logging of different accesses or different, accessing certain pieces of data somewhere, then this is unifying the solution into SASE or SSE is really going to give you a good capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll jump to the last one here. Having a small IT or security team with limited bandwidth, right? I mean, this is a conversation we're in pretty often, especially on the security team side. I mean, I don't think it's news to anybody how much of a challenge it is to recruit and retain top security talent. And in our opinion, that talent should largely be focused on guiding and managing vendors, setting out strategic direction. Certainly not just the very basics of blocking and tackling around network security. It's really hard for our clients to get completely staffed security shops, and having something like this and being able to do as a service has helped some of them.
And to reinforce that, finding the trigger point piece, we're working with someone right now, and the conversation started with SD-WAN, and they were looking for SD-WAN capabilities. And when we brought up, hey, you are considering these vendors, but have you considered moving a lot of this solution to the cloud? What other things are you looking at in your 2023 roadmap? And it's, well, we'd like to implement monitored SOC and monitored EDR for all of our endpoints and our servers. And we're also moving a bunch of our business apps to the cloud because they're on-prem right now. And we are moving to this and that. And, it's just listing all those capabilities. And, when you go back and look at the vendor offerings, there are 3 or 4 different vendors that are all going to offer way better implementation timelines, because once you get the initial implementation out of the way, all that additional stuff is just changing the service plan. And so you don't actually have to do it all at once. You can do it as needed, but you can phase those kind of capabilities in, and the overhead is way less.
Yeah, I mean, that I know the client you're talking about, and I think we really benefited there, and they benefited by taking a step back and kind of opening the aperture. We're talking about a network thing, but sit down, look at the roadmap, and there's all these security items where if we don't think about those, it's fine, we'll get a great SD-WAN vendor, in place, but we're creating the scenario where next year, we're going to have vendor sprawl. We're going to end up with a lot more vendors. We're going to lose efficiency of scale around pricing. We're going to lose efficiency of scale around management of those vendors. Whereas when you look at it holistically, and you don't have to do it all now, but you're creating a vendor partner relationship where you can lean into them, where you can actually truly partner with them to execute on your roadmap, instead of being in this constant cycle of going and needing to find, a vendor that fits a single piece on your roadmap. Which, we, especially with both of our background, a lot of our work is kind of by with and through people. And we're firm believers that with
Absolutely.
the right vendor partners, you can execute a lot quicker on your roadmap.
So how do we get started? For all those people that are sold, right? We are going to be going deep into this in some of the other videos, but really it's again a non-sexy answer. But you have to identify your business goals. Take a holistic look at your infrastructure, because any migration to some type of SASE architecture or the capability that's being offered there in SSE is really going to be driven by what your needs are and what your current investments are. Once you kind of identify your business goals and identify current environment and constraints, I'm a big proponent of, like that asset inventory as step one in the security process. But you keep in mind it's both network and security constraints and environments. But then you really got to consider all the rest of the things that are at the bottom here. I'll just call out like network and security team size. We are in a lot of conversations and it's like, oh yeah, that's a great capability. But I only have 2 people. So how am I going to be able to implement this along with all of our other digital transformation initiatives, and that's kind of the hybrid versus total implementation, deciding on whether or not you need all the different capabilities in SASE, or taking a look at different vendor offerings and really identifying which ones are going to be fitting some of your business goals. And do you have any big business changes? It is amazing how many conversations we're in when we have a conversation with the CIO or CISO, and we're discussing different with the roadmap that got created 2 years ago, and like, well, are you looking to get sold? Are you looking to go public? Are you looking to acquire? And how do those big business changes adjust your current roadmap? That is mind-blowing on itself, right? And so identifying all those things up front is the non-sexy work that you have to do. And we have helped a lot of people discuss this in the past. But then you kind of get into, Kyle, I'll pass it over to you for any additional comments on this one.
No, I think these are the basic steps for undertaking, just about any initiative in this space. I think the advice is to look at it holistically. Doesn't mean that you have to execute on it holistically, but I think you're leaving an unexamined opportunity if you don't. And there is a decent list of things to consider down here below. These are conversations we enjoy having with our clients, right? You get to dive deep, you get to talk about the lessons learned, get to understand a lot about their business and really truly partner with them. So those are great.
Yeah. So what's the next step after that, right? Like, okay, we have analyzed our business case and, figured it all out. Can we go to the next one, Josh? So how do I actually make steps towards this? Take your goals, constraints, and gaps and start shopping for vendors. And if you are a technically minded person out there and you have had a sales conversation and navigated the sales funnel at different vendors, you understand how much of a great undertaking this is going to be. But really deciding that point solution versus managed services, finding the correct vendor that matches with your roadmap. And is Prisma, for example, this is a conversation we had with someone recently who had just invested in Palo Alto firewalls, and they were just really looking at the whole offering behind that, and like, is that the best fit if you've already purchased Palo Alto firewalls? Maybe. What are the rest of your business cases? What capabilities is Prisma offering that maybe a different vendor is going to be able to still integrate with Prisma, with managed services, and also give you the benefit of managed services and some additional best in breed solutions, because that might be the best, decision for you. And again, at the bottom, you develop that desired roadmap based off of what your initiatives and your capability is, because we, as I think an organization, try to keep in mind that change is hard. Digital transformation initiatives do not happen overnight, which is why implementation is such a big piece of what we do. It's not just, linking up vendors. It's really following through. Okay, now we have implemented SD-WAN and, Q1, this is great. But, there's still 3 quarters this year and we still have the rest of our roadmap. So, how is that next gen firewall going to integrate with that SD-WAN solution if you haven't considered that previously?
Great point. I mean, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't say, as far as these last 2 slides, I mean, look, we care about people forwarding their business and doing what's best for them. So we kind of give you the steps here. I think the easy button would be calling us. We work and guide really through these kind of steps, every day of the week. So, for what it's worth, we're also happy to help guide through these bullet points, utilizing our process, and help evaluate it holistically. Yes, finally, last thing we had is just some other resources on it. So we've got a couple things here. We've done we've had some guests on our podcast from a couple of leading SASE providers. Cato, according to Gartner, was the first and maybe still the only vendor that, according to Gartner at least, has a complete SASE offering.
Yeah, they are the closest for sure.
Palo Alto, traditionally coming more from the security side, the firewall side, acquired a company named CloudGenix to bring the SD-WAN offering there, and has developed some other components to kind of put check marks in those other boxes as well. And then finally, in partnership with one of our distributors, Avant, we also have available this 6-12 report, which basically looks at the next 6 and 12 months. It's based on surveys from I forget the exact number of CIOs and IT leaders, but looking at basically how are they looking at network and security and the convergence there. So a lot of data in there, a lot of feedback, directly from CIOs and really kind of our primary stakeholders, peers, and other organizations. So those are all available at resourcive.com in the Resourcive section. And then next up will be webinar number 2. So coming back after the new year, we'll be deep diving into the components of SASE. So, really understanding what those individual elements can and should do for your organization, and taking a pretty technical approach there.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit more technical, and it will be based on some of those other capabilities that vendors offer that are not part of the core components, but private backbones and all the different pieces that go into a really good capability, and focusing on that like secure network as a service, right? And how do you best as an organization secure your network?
Yeah, I mean, the things we didn't really get into here, right? I mean, we talked about, you can self-manage, you can co-manage, you can fully manage. Well, we're skipping across a lot there as far as how that impacts an organization. Can they manage third-party circuits, for instance? Can they source them? Can they open tickets on your behalf? Those types of things. Those things that aren't necessarily the items that Gartner is listing, but that we see our clients care about a lot. Those are the pieces we'll really be talking about quite a bit.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kyle and Adrian. That was